Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Owen J. Roberts High School working session. The Owen J. Roberts School District Board of Directors utilizes the working session process as a way to consider agenda items as one large committee for the purposes of discussion and debate in full view of the public. Time permitting, the committee chairperson may open the meeting up for public discussion on items being discussed by the committee at the time. We are going to start with Legislative and Policy Committee. Mr. Bentman.
Good evening, everybody. So first up, we have Policy 226, Search of Students, Student Lockers, and Student Vehicles. So for this one, additional language was added to the policy. Students who refuse to consent to a search shall request shall be considered in violation of this policy, insubordination and defiance of authority. Refusal to cooperate with this policy update, officials can constitute further grounds for exclusion from school. So there's some few changes throughout the policy, specifically two. Questions for this policy?
Mr. Benton, we can assume that this was reviewed by legal and given.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, this one was vetted multiple ways, specifically legal multiple times based off of the search.
All right. Anybody from the committee have any questions about this one? We've kind of all seen these before. We just weren't able to vote on them.
No questions here.
Then may I have a motion to move it forward to the full committee?
So moved.
Full board, sorry, excuse me. Okay, does that have a second?
Second.
Okay. Item 2.02, Policy 808, Food Services. Changes to this policy were made primarily due to changes in the PA school code. Previously was written that schools may offer assistance to parents and guardians for applying for free or reduced price meals. The new policy states that we are required to offer assistance. Additionally, there was some added information about things that we cannot discriminate against, including sexual orientation, religion, and handicap. Any questions from the committee? Anybody? Then may I have a motion to move this forward to the full board?
So moved. Second.
Okay, item 2.03. These two documents are listed to acknowledge the receipt of changes to Regulation 808A, free and reduced lunches, and Regulation 808B, school nutrition. No action is required. This is just for us to acknowledge their receipt. As far as Regulation 808 is concerned, very minor changes. The food service coordinator title was removed and replaced with the CFO designee, and sexual orientation, religion, and handicap were added to the listings that no individual would be discriminated against, and this is primarily to, be consistent with all of our policies. Regulation 808B, the changes that were given were under the student behavior objective setting. The word healthier was added before fat foods, which is don't tell my wife. And two new objectives were added: to eat lean proteins from a variety of sources and to eat foods that contain less sugar. Everybody happy with those two? Okay, they are acknowledged. Item 2.04, Policy 202, Eligibility of Non-Resident Students. Parts of this policy were amended to conform to a new state law, which outlines guidelines when enrolling students who are experiencing education instability. I believe also we added a requirement in the waiving of tuition for non-resident students. These students are now eligible to enroll at the beginning of the year if their parent or guardian has executed a contract to buy a residence or rent one in the district by October 31st. Any questions? A motion to move this forward?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay. Item 2.05, policy 202.1, eligibility of non-resident students dash non-resident children placed in the home of a resident. This policy was revised to admit students into the district that are placed in the home of a district resident by a court or government agency. Students can also attend a school in the district if a district resident has obtained legal guardianship of that child. Questions? Motion?
I'll motion.
Come on,
Second.
guys, come on, come on, come on. Push that buzzer. You got your second? Yeah. Okay. All right. Item 2.06, policy 202.2. Another exciting one, eligibility of non-resident students and non-resident children living with a district resident. Wording in this policy was just kind of reworded upon the recommendation of the PSBA. Motion to move it forward.
So moved.
Second.
I'll second.
Okay. Item 2.07, the administration had brought these two regulations forward at the April working session, but some committee members were wondering about convictions of some offenses and limited. The regulations state that people in the House may not be convicted of a certain crime for 5 years. And some members wanted to know why we could not extend that to longer. And our lawyer had reviewed these regulations with the answer being that this policy mirrors the language of the state statute and that he did not think we should move this 5-year timeline. I think primarily because if we did, and we were in conflict with the state law, then we could be probably sued, right?
Correct, yes. So the recommendation is within the 5 years to match the state statute. So, yep.
Okay, so again, this is just
I think our point was that we wouldn't necessarily restrict the student based on that affidavit, but the affidavit is simply what we're asking them to attest to. So if there was someone convicted within more than 5 years of that time, then it would give us the opportunity to discuss that situation?
Well, they're only filling it out based off of the 5 years. So the language, I believe, in the form specifically states 5 years. Now, if they inform us that it's more than 5 years, we could, but I don't know, in regards to matching the state statute, I don't think we have any legal grounds to dismiss them from being a student.
But was that explained to the lawyer that we were not looking to take legal action, but to basically have the data collection? That we were interested in knowing whether someone had been convicted of these offenses, because we would want to be more cautious in that situation.
So legal came back to us and said, and I don't know if I'm understanding your question correctly, but legal came back to us and said we can only go back 5 years from the date of the affidavit signed. We can't go back more. So
Okay.
our affidavit has to match what the state statute matches, which is 5 years. So there probably wouldn't be a time where, unless they would call us and say, well, I was convicted of this crime 7, 8 years ago, and informing us, but quite honestly, I don't know how much legal ground we have to dismiss an opportunity for a student in this situation.
So essentially, if it was 5 years and 1 day that someone was convicted of this, then the student could still be placed in home education with them because they would not be obligated to disclose that under the law.
Correct.
I guess it makes me uncomfortable, but if we're not allowed to
Even if
take
we
legal
knew
action.
an offense happened 5 years, 1 day, or prior to that, I wouldn't feel comfortable using it in any judgment based around the student. Because it's outside of these bounds, one, and those bounds were set to specifically give someone, for a cliche term, a second chance, right? And C, it really has no bearing on the student themselves, because someone in their household, could be an extended family member, did something a decade ago. So I think we would probably open ourselves up to a little bit of liability if we allowed us that prior conviction to weigh on a current decision.
And we're also not limiting their ability, they are living in the house with this person. All we are determining as to whether or not they can receive their education in that house. We're not even necessarily agreeing to allow that person to educate the child. It's that they are living in the house. So they are in this house regardless. It's whether or not we are seeing them here during the day or not.
That is correct. Yeah, we're just recognizing the affidavit for that 5-year period.
And even if they did attest that they didn't, were convicted within the last 5 years, I don't specifically see it stated on here that it means they cannot have home education by that individual. It's just asking, right?
That was the original reason that I think you and I had asked for the clarification of whether we could change the affidavit.
Right.
Because
so-
we didn't believe that this affidavit had to be in line with what we grant to the student according to the law. But now it's sounding like our lawyer is advising us the other way around, that this does need to be in alignment with the exact wording in the law.
I guess my question is, if they fill out that, yes, they have a criminal record within the last 5 years, does that mean they cannot be educated in the home with this individual? Is that what this is stating? 'Cause I don't read it like that.
I'll give you my opinion, and this is not a legal opinion, but I think it would be a red flag for us that they could not attest to it on this phone. And then we would need to look into it further and determine whether that person can do it. But I would say it's very similar to clearances. I would look at this almost as like clearances, which have to be within 5 years. So we would not employ someone in a position in our school district who could not get their clearances because they had an offense within the past 5 years.
Yeah, I'm not saying I'm not saying they should not be allowed to be educated in the home because of a conviction. That's not what the question was. My question here is, I want to make sure that that is not a definitive consequence just because they have a criminal record.
Right,
if
I
that
think it
makes
would be a
sense.
marker, and then we would have to get,
Okay.
a legal opinion on that.
Because we eventually would need to sign off on everything saying we're good to go, because we need to keep these files and these records within our organization, so we have that information. So if that were the case, then we would most likely have to put stuff on hold and figure out what next steps would be. We were never in that situation. It's a good question, but I'm assuming just basically based off of asking this, that's something that we would need to look into if they said they were.
Everybody good?
So in that case, there's no need to vote on it because we're
Yep.
not making any changes, right? We're just
Well,
leaving it alone?
it's a regulation, so we just acknowledge.
But I don't think any changes were made to it, right?
No changes were made, so then since it's regulation, we're good.
Right.
Okay. Item 2.08, policy 227, controlled substance / paraphernalia. This policy was previously titled Drug, Alcohol, and Mind-Altering Substance Policy. I think additional language was added to this policy for students who are seeking help from substance abuse. There are also some guidelines for the administration on reporting incidents involving possession, use, or sale of controlled substances and of anabolic steroids. There is also some discussion from the full board, I believe, regarding discipline for first versus second offenses. And I believe for the first offense, the language was changed so that a student can be not expelled, suspended for up to 7 days, given the discretion, given some more discretion to the administration. But with the second offense, it's a period of 10 days. Obviously, after the first offense, the student has received, lots of guidance and hopefully some clarification and whatever help they need. But if that goes without changing the behavior, then the administration is given the requirement to suspend for 10 days. Any questions from the committee about this policy?
Who determines if this suspension is, and maybe all suspension, who determines if suspension's in school or out of school?
Who determines if the suspension is in school or out of school? The building principal.
So that's still within the building principle, so we're not dictating on here if it's in school or out of school. Correct? I don't see it
It doesn't
on here.
say in school or out of school, it just says suspension, correct?
So is there any information about how often we choose out of school versus in school for suspensions related to discipline policies?
So
Brad,
for
do you have
this
information on that?
For this policy, it would be out-of-school suspension. So with a controlled substance, not tobacco or vaping policy, which is 222, but for 227, it would be out-of-school suspension for this policy. But there are other violations of the code of conduct or policies that could require or could a decision by the assistant principal or principal would be an in-school or out-of-school. In-school would be a lesser disciplinary action than an out-of-school suspension.
I just want to follow up. I think there was a comment at the last board meeting related to the parental involvement once this policy is enacted. Where exactly, at what point are the parents engaged in these types of discipline issues?
Yeah, pretty much right away. Obviously, the situation needs to be settled. So first, obviously, the student would come up to the office. Here, you're most likely talking about a high school student, could be a middle school student. Late elementary, haven't really had any in those areas, but typically high school. And so one of the first steps would be to contact the parent. Yeah, and there's some language in here about parent contact with first offense and second offense. Also under the guidelines in the third paragraph, in this case, assistant principal or principal would notify the parent of any student directly involved. So in really, specifically this high level, we want to make sure we involve the parents right away. It's just best practice, and we collaborate and we're a team.
Great, thanks.
Right, so I'm reading first offense, one, the building administrator shall immediately contact the student's parents, guardians, and request that they come to the building administrator's office immediately. 2, building administrator shall contact the district superintendent and law enforcement, and then 3, shall schedule an informal hearing. So it does sound like they are talking to the parents or guardians even before they're talking to the superintendent and law enforcement? Is that being followed currently?
Most likely, unless it's, depending on how serious the situation is and if the student is, most likely they'll talk to a parent. Sometimes, law enforcement in regards to our security, they might contact, but it's pretty quick. I would say it's either it's basically one, that first parent, and then law enforcement, but if it's depending on the situation, they might need to act a little quicker with law enforcement if needed.
Are you saying because of the drug offense, or if the student is exhibiting violence or other behaviors that would warrant law enforcement?
Could be drug offense, could be, there might be a concern, like they might be, might have the mood altering substance within their system already, so we might need to go nurse visit, notify law enforcement, call parents as soon as that kind of, that action goes. So I can't sit up here and tell you that every single time parent is contacted before, let's say, a nurse or maybe chief security on school grounds, but we want to inform the parents right away.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions
Can the, is it open to the board now or just the?
from the committee?
Okay.
Any further questions from the board?
Well, yes, thank you. So when I'm reading the difference between first and second offense, under the first offense, it talks about having the option of requesting a formal disciplinary hearing to be scheduled before the Board of School Directors. When I read under second offense, after, in Part D, Section I, it says suspend the student for 10 days, and then Section 2, request a formal expulsory hearing to be scheduled before the board. It doesn't have the same language of an option, or it to me reads that if someone is suspended for 10 days, it automatically comes to the board for expulsion.
Are you comparing sections 1 and 2? Because section 1 is a violation where they
I'm sorry.
possess, and section 2
Okay,
is a
yes.
student
You're right, I'm
distributes.
reading-
So I think
yes,
that
I've
might
jumped
be
between them.
why there
Okay.
is a distinction there.
Okay. So within this distinction, then, anyone who is distributes is automatically, it goes to an expulsion hearing.
Correct. A second offense would be recommended for expulsion.
A second offense for
Yeah.
distribution.
Let me pull it up.
So what's the first for distribution?
Pull it up.
So first offense distribution, right? So number 2, a student distributes controlled substance, would be suspend for 10 days, request a formal expulsionary hearing. So that would happen for distribution.
So that's for first offense for distribution.
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Yes,
So, okay,
because they don't have first or second offense.
okay.
Yes.
Can you give us an idea of the frequency of how frequently we are in a second offense, and how quickly how closely the second offense has to happen to the first offense? Is it just for the duration of their high school career? Is this something that if we see, 18 months, 2 years later, the child has made good decisions and has had a relapse, does that automatically trigger a second offense?
Good
Is there
question.
some grace periods in?
Sure, typically go 1 year, one school year, not 1 year like April to April, but one school year. We really don't use multiple years unless we have a serious situation and there's multiple high-level offenses over the course of several years based off the circumstances. But for this in a situation, if a student, vape with THC and it's a second offense that same year, it does not happen often. We've had a few situations, but not many.
And in the few situations we've had, they have all resulted in this 10 days suspension. There haven't been other circumstances that have, whether the child had an IEP or had some other exterior circumstances that caused us not to use automatically go to the second offense rule.
That is correct, right. We may be pretty close to it, so maybe a 9-day, but we typically 9 or 10 day, pretty close to it for the second offense. We're very consistent with this policy.
And when, going back to a first offense, what other, I know that we have support and referral services that are provided to the child. What type of legal ramifications do they have outside of this policy for a first offense? Do all of our first offenses get automatically referred to, whether we cite them or the state police cites them? Are they all referred into the judicial system with a first offense?
We go through that. We go through our chief of security, so it's a summary offense. We do not send it over to the state police. Now, it's something kind of a change over the course of the year or so that we've moved to kind of keep that at our level, because I want to take care of the kid as the best we can and focus on like our supports that we have here in the district and not bring it to the state police level. So that's summary offense through our security, our school police.
So they have some other sort of discipline or punishment besides what's written in this policy?
Yeah, based off of what the result of that could be. And then there's also the proactive piece where we do the drug and alcohol screening, and then it gets elevated to support kind of on the social service piece, mental health side type of deal. Yeah. So those are kind of the things we do. Yeah.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
So as I've mentioned at the previous working session and at subsequent board meetings, I'm still really not comfortable with the hard 10-day suspension for second offenses. And the basic reasoning that I'm putting forth comes down to equity policy for different students. I think, first of all, I'm not happy with suspensions to begin with, and I think that's a discussion for another time. And I've asked, requested some information on that. But besides that, the hard 10-day suspension is going to impact different students differently. And there will be some students that can take a 10-day suspension and do their work independently and get along with their education as normal. And there will be other students that will not be able to work independently in a 10-day suspension. And here you're talking about kids that are struggling, okay? And now we're isolating them more, keeping them away from their peers. And so I think that compounds the impact of that on some particular students. And this hard 10-day suspension for some students, could push them into failing for the year. And therefore, I think we're not adequately educating our students equitably. And so that's why I would like to see some flexibility on that 10-day suspension for the second offense.
Is there a length of suspension or absence that triggers tutoring or home visits to provide resources? So that the
There is not. I mean,
education
we gather the work, the students are provided with the work when they are on a suspension from the teacher and can reach out to the teacher if they have questions, but there's no one going to the home for those.
But they are given the workload.
Correct.
How
And they can-
successful are they in completing that workload on average?
I would say when they're out there, I would just be speculating, but they have the time to do it, so the question is whether or not they're doing it or not, so I can't speak to how successful they are. What I will say, though, is with technology and with our learning management systems and stuff, it's not like it used to be where if a student was out, they had no access. All of our courses are set up for our teachers where they have the stuff on the learning management system. So kids, even though they're not in school, have access to the materials that in the past they would not have had access to that material.
I had a question on the contacting of law enforcement authorities. Does that, depending on the offense, mean turned over to the police, or just sent home with the parents and then there's a referral?
Yeah, so if it's an offense that violates the crime code, then that is something that's reported to the police. Whether it be, a lot of it we do handle internally with our own police department. some we refer out. So if it would be something typically like a drug violation, something pretty significant would be referred out to the state police on campus or one of our local departments. Something in the school, I'll call it like a minor disturbance, which still is a crimes code violation. We handle that with our internal police department. So in talking with Chief Yount, who's our director of security, so we do issue citations for misconduct, for fights, things of that nature, but we work with the district justice, and we have this program, it's a diversionary program called the Third Millennium, and if the students participate in that, then the summary charge is revoked. So we do have opportunities for students that because ultimately we want to remediate and change the behavior. So most of our students do take part in this. So I believe that we've only had internally 2 citations that went through the entire process, and the students were actually cited and have it on their record. All the other times we were able to use other techniques.
When you say only 2 students have been cited, multiple other students are you saying multiple others have been cited, but they went through the program and got?
Correct, because it's a crimes code violation, so we do issue the citation, but then we work with the district justice who speaks with the students, and then we put them in the diversionary program, and then the charges are dropped.
What's this diversionary program like?
Yeah, the program that we use, it's called the Third Millennium, and it's a program that the student and the parents pay for. It's about $60, but it's an actual course on the violation or the behavior or the violation that they had. So it's a learning opportunity for them to go through and complete that course, and once they do, like I said, then at that point, the charges are withdrawn.
So is this part of then that 10-day suspension that we have, or this is in addition
No,
to the 10?
they're still suspended, but then this is something that they go through, and they could start it, if we get them registered right away, they could start it during their suspension, but if they go through this, then the charge is dropped.
How many students are we citing?
I don't have those numbers. Chief Yount was working on that, but our school officer was out the last 2 days, but it is something I'm working on gathering.
Can we get numbers for how many students are being cited, and then what the demographics of those students are, IEPs and such like that?
We can pull numbers, yes.
Okay.
We also test the substance too. Mr. Rotoli, kind of follow up too on your question. So if it is something we can test, like a vape, we can test if it has THC or not. It shows up right away.
So I'm thinking that Mrs. Sabo's request for the information on students could just be part of our regular information on like discipline, because we've been very interested in those numbers recently.
Correct, and we do a school safety report and executive session at the end of June, and we can have those discussions as well.
Yeah, I think it would be great to set the expectation that these will be gathered regularly rather than just as a one-off request.
Any further questions or comments? If not, do I have a motion from the committee to move this policy on to the board for a second reading?
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay.
I'd like to make a comment. Because I don't like being able to be able to move things, disciplinary policies forward without feeling comfortable without having the information. Because how many of our students is this happening to? How many are out? I would really like that information. We can move this forward for now, but I think we might, after getting the data and the information, might need to revisit some of the discipline if we're seeing some pretty drastic numbers or whatnot. It's just concerning to pass something with disciplinary actions when we don't have an idea of what it looks like within our district.
Well, I believe the only change that we're making to the disciplinary section is the addition of the up to 7 days
Right.
for the first offense. I don't think we're making any change to the subsequent offense, so should we want to change anything around there, I mean, we're making it more flexible with the 7 days, which is, I think everybody had agreed, a good thing regardless of how many students are affected. So my thought is that if we promote these changes that are not, that is not the biggest change in this document. The bigger changes are all the rewording to align with Pennsylvania standards. So that was the part that I thought was worth having the full board review and approve, regardless of whether we want to make additional changes once we get that data.
Yeah, I mean, there's a big component about students seeking help for abuse. That part really like to have that move forward. So even though there's one part that we still have concerns about as a policy as a whole, I think there's, it needs to be in place.
I said,
then-
I've said, I said we
Okay.
can move it forward, but I'm just saying, it's really, I feel uncomfortable making some of these decisions and voting on them without having the data and such for our district. That was just all I think it's a good idea for us to have this information if we are moving policies forward that relate to discipline for our students.
Yeah, and John will share that information with the board in executive session. We do a Safe Schools report every year, so you'll have that information. I think it's important to make a distinction here. So the policy is the school side of how we handle the discipline, the suspension. The police matter is totally separate.
Right.
That's crime code violation. So we try and work with our district justice, who we have a great relationship with, so that students, there are consequences, but we're not putting a record on them. That's why I said there were 2 students that went through the entire process that I'm aware of this year that went through and actually got the citation. Everyone else, we were able to work through this diversionary program to take the charges away. So I do want to make that distinction between the policy and school discipline and law enforcement, which is separate.
Right, and I think part of the question is whether or not 10 days is the right amount when we do have a criminal process that we're following as well. And while I understand that it's the first instance that that the proposed change has been and that we've been discussing, that doesn't mean that, the board can't consider changing the 10-day for sure.
And any policy. I just want to
Right.
also point out that 2.10 that we haven't gotten to yet is the regulations that have been in over 5 years without revision. So nobody on this board has had a chance to review or comment or vote on them, and they're still in place. So just because we haven't voted on it, us as a board, doesn't mean that the old policy is worthless or meaningless. It is in place, and it is what is currently applicable.
And with that segue, items 2.09 and 2.10 are, Mr. Bentman has made a nice summary of what we have done this year as far as policy regulations and deletions. And he's also acknowledged that we have a fair amount, as Ms. Munson said, some policies that have not been revised for over a decade. So that list, there was one that was over a decade. Yeah, anyway, longer than we would like. And so that would be the work for the committee as we go into next year, correct? Yes. Sorry.
I don't want to minimize too the amount or the policies, but there are some here that would just need to be reviewed by the board, and as a review, some are going to need to be revised. But we working on the ones we've worked on, and these are the kind of the next up through the kind of the importance level, so to speak, or things that have come up through PSBA. So you may see policies we reviewed last year come up before these policies because of PSBA changes and because of needs either from board members or from administration. So, but this gives us a really good roadmap.
And also, with this list, if any board member sees a policy which they have, particular concerns about, they can ask us to review it, in an expedited manner. We don't have to just wait till we get around to it. We can, set priorities for certain policies. I'll put
In the comment section for the year in review, which is the first one on the agenda, You'll see some say pending legal review. That is, they've gone through the process. Now they just need to make sure the footnotes are correct, because there's many laws and statutes that are connected to each policy. So PSBA does that for us, and they are very busy this time of year because all school districts like us are in the same boat. But I think you'll be happy to know that this particular district is in pretty good shape compared to maybe some others in regards to dates. So.
Okay,
I
well,
just got a question on general for this section. What's the genesis of these? Like, in the list, I see a bunch of policies that need revision, meaning they were already on the books. When do, but I don't see like a section of potential new policies that were put in place for things that didn't exist last year, ChatGPT and things like that, that we want to start being forward thinking about. How do we initiate that conversation and get new policies to kind of start swirling around the district here?
So if you're familiar with the numbers, that's kind of driven at a state level as far as how the policies sort out. So for a topic like ChatGPT, we would probably want to see if there's an existing technology-related policy, and then determine, if there's already a policy with a number, then we can bring that up for revision, talk about it on the L&P committee, and make the modifications to it, rather than having to introduce a whole new policy and determine where the numbering should be. What were you going to say, Brad?
You captured it. You captured it very nicely. Thank you.
So if there, just for sake of argument, if there isn't a policy that we feel can cover whatever the topic is there's space to create a new?
You could bring it up to administration, the L&P committee, and then I'll get notified. I'll do the work with PSBA to see if there's a policy that exists. And then what I'll also do is I'll check local school districts. And if you go around and look at policies from other districts, a lot of them are similar in nature. Some of them are exactly the same, mirror copies of each other based off of what that specific policy is. And then we can look to see if there's something that's already written. And if not, then we're really starting from scratch and then working through PSBA. But a lot of it does occur. And sometimes it does behoove us to wait and be patient, because PSBA and their legal team and their kind of board take care of a lot of the legwork for us. So when it gets to us, it's kind of not fit and finish, but a good start for Owen J. Roberts.
Thank you.
okay. With that, that is the end of items for L&P, and I have a feeling we will have some more interest in regards to athletic programs.
Okay, we are moving on to agenda item 3, new athletic programs. Dr. Cuthbert.
Good evening. Thanks for the opportunity to come here tonight to talk to you guys. This process has been more than a few weeks and a few months. Some folks in this room I've heard from for over a year. Several of our coaches have worked very hard at gauging interest, doing signups. Now we have, some limitations with our facilities here, which are a concern, and we're looking at updating our program. So Frank, if you can get that PowerPoint up there. So basically, we've talked. There were several sports that came up. We're looking at our situation now with our facilities, with our fields, and I feel like after going through this process, there are several teams that I feel we can add fairly easily that are not going to put too much of a strain on the limitations that we have right now. So we did look at student interest, the youth group. Is there a lot of interest in the youth group for that sport? Obviously, cost was a big consideration. And then our staff, fields, resources, and how much, do we need to do site work to be able to start this sport? Are there other things that we have to spend money on? So we looked at that, and our recommendation, Frank, if you want to hit one, looking at for next school year. And I just want to tell you a little bit about these sports. High school girls golf. Right now, our girls play on the boys team. Our coach generally, there's 16 boys, and he reserves 4 spots for girls. We believe that if we have a girls' team, we're going to get a lot more students out. Interest looks like somewhere in the 15 to 25 range is what we're hoping for. Obviously signing up or showing interest in something and then, showing up on the first day of practice, sometimes they're two different things, but we feel that we'll definitely have enough for a team. We've had some outstanding female golfers. Just mention one, Stefania Fadon. A couple of years ago, she won the girls' championship, and then she went and played in the boys' championship and won that one too. She's going to Lehigh for golf. So we had some amazing kids. This is an off-site sport. We go to Kimberton. We rent Kimberton for $1,200, and they're giving us obviously a very discounted rate. They're very friendly with us. So the girls, we would be looking to go there. The coach feels that he can manage it. They give us a certain number of tee times. We can work with the boys and the girls there. We can also look for if there's conflicts and issues with course availability, other courses in the area. Golf in general is not a really expensive sport. We buy the polo shirts for them, so we're already buying 4. We may be buying 15 next year for the girls. We buy balls. We buy a lot of golf balls. They get, range tokens. But these are things that, are not a ton of money. And I think that if we provide this program for the girls, give them the same opportunity the boys, I think we're going to see a lot more girls golfing. So that's one that we felt fit and could easily be added without too much strain. High school girls wrestling. So right now, with kind of our facility limitations, if you've been near the Aux gym after school in the winter, you'll see a whole lot of wrestlers. They drop the divider. We have middle school on one side, we have high school on the other side. They really have to work together to share the space. Right now, we have girls wrestling at the high school and the middle school, and they're in the same area. They're working with the same coaches. We're looking at this as an extension really of what they're already doing. And one thing that I think it's important, so maybe we don't have 20 girl wrestlers the first year. Now that it's an official sport, the girls can wrestle with the guys, but wrestling they have a few dual meets. So each team, the PIAA gives them 22 competition points, and a dual meet's 1, and then they go to a lot of tournaments, which are generally 2. If the girls and boys are mixed and there's no separate girls team, and you take the girls to competitions, they count towards the team total. So what you're gonna have there is it's gonna impact the boys and the girls if we don't do a separate girls team. Because males will not be going to the same number of tournaments. That's going to be drastically decreased because we need to count the female tournaments in our total. So I think this is something that's important to consider, and you register for these tournaments ahead of time, early, like now. And so this is something that, I think we need to do. And I don't think it's going to be a huge expense. Like we're already buying the singlets. We may have a few more. We may need to add a coach because obviously they could be in different places at the same time. The girls could have a tournament on the same day as the boys, and we want to make sure we're covered there. Steve Duraflo and his coaches do a great job. He's the head coach. I feel if we add one position, because they have 2 assistants there, so really could, if they're sharing, you could literally have a head coach and assistant coach for each team. And it works in our facility setup right now with how we're using things.
We have about 6 or 8 wrestlers now?
Yeah, and
we
a
think
lot of
that number
teams
will
have
go up.
started, like you can start with 1, and a lot of a lot of people are starting teams with some lower numbers because of now it's a sport. It changes it in terms of the competition points. It's definitely a big factor now. But it is the fastest growing sport in PA is girls wrestling right now. And we feel like, we have middle school kids doing it too. I think we're going to see more of that in the near future too. But I think it would be a great sport to add. I think we have 5 right now in the pack that have added already, and several more are considering. And the athletic directors are going to have to work together on that because what we're looking at, instead of maybe with a dual meet between 2 schools, we might have 3 or 4 teams there to get enough, matchups for wrestling. But so there's flexibility with the scheduling there too. But we feel that we definitely can make that one work. And then the third one, middle school boys lacrosse. If you haven't seen our girls lacrosse team play, I tell you guys, we have a state game Wednesday at 7. They're amazing. They have a real good shot at winning a state title. They have a middle school feeder program and the boys do not. So I feel like this is going to be a big boost to our boys lacrosse program. The youth group has been very active. in promoting this and willing to work with us. And I think this is doable because they're willing to work with us with equipment to work together, maybe do some fundraisers so we're not, and gradually build up our equipment. A lot of kids that play lacrosse have their own equipment, but there's going to be some that don't. So this is a partnership really that I think is going to enable us to do this next year instead of buying everything all at once. I think you're looking at a big bill. But they've been great, and like I said, our coaches have been great, and they're willing to work together on that. So we do have a field open. Our boys lacrosse team would just follow the girls' model. Generally, when middle school starts, our girls' middle school comes to the high school and practices on North Turf, and then our girls for the high school will come after them. So that would be the same setup for the boys. Right now, South is open. There's no one playing on it after school. There's some groups that use it for off-season workouts just because it's open, but it would work because the boys would go after school, and then the high school boys would come after them. So it would really follow the same setup as the girls. And I think that with those things considered, I think that that's something that we could also incorporate without a huge cost, a startup cost. And I think those are the three sports for next year that I think that we can work into what we presently have and the limitations there, and I think that they would work. Unified track and field, that's going to be Mr. Wenzel.
Could I ask a quick question about lacrosse? You talked about having the practice space. We have game space.
Yeah, same thing.
Okay.
So like for the girls, for example, they play at 3:30 and 4:30 for middle school games, and on days they have games, our high school team comes later. So they generally like 5 normally, but if it's that day, it's probably 5:30. And our boys would be doing the same thing that the girls are doing, and it's worked very well with the girls. So I think that, like I said, that would be a smooth transition.
Thank you. I had one other quick question. I know that we currently have a handful of golfers and wrestlers. Do you anticipate that this will increase the number of athletes engaged in O&J sports, or do you think this will shift them from other sports? Like, are we going to be looking at our boys lacrosse players coming out of the track program and reducing numbers there, or do you see this as, my hopeful answer is that this increases the number of children participating and not just shifting around children participating?
I mean, obviously, I can't predict exactly what it will be. I think there may be some shifting, but I think a lot of kids are already playing boys lacrosse. They're forced to play on a club instead of for a school team in the middle school. So my hope is that most of those kids will not be shifting. However, if you've been down to the track at all in the spring after school, there's about 400 kids there. So it's very crowded. So I think it gives another opportunity for kids who maybe already have an interest in those sports. And especially with the golf and wrestling, I feel like girls come out, but I feel like if there was a separate girls team, we would see more girls coming out, which I think would be a great thing. I think they deserve to have their own team there. And then, are there any other questions?
Yeah, I have a quick one.
Yeah.
Are the costs here, are these total startup costs or annual?
So right now they're annual. I think that's the next one. Is Mr. Wenzel going to do the?
Yeah, sorry, yeah, go ahead. We can.
Are you going to do it later, or you want to do it now?
Well, we can.
Are you guys
We can
tired
do
of
it
hearing
now.
of me right now?
Yeah,
You want to
yeah.
hear a different voice?
Eric, you can do yours, and then we can just take questions
Yeah.
that folks have afterwards. So, you can do yours now, and then Randy will come back to you.
Take a
and you
break for me.
You can tag team the questions that come in.
All right, I'll try to be quick. But so I coached track here for a long time before I became a principal, and I would go to states and watch these unified track athletes run at states. And I'm thinking, why don't we have this? So now that I'm in a kind of a leadership role, I want to start unified track and field here at O&J Roberts. Unified track and field is going to be at O&J Roberts just like any other PIAA sport here. It's a recognized PIAA sport. They're eligible to earn varsity letters. They're eligible to get, for pep rallies, postseason awards, any things that we do here, they're eligible for. The roster can be anywhere from 12 to 40 kids, and it's co-ed. They can be in 9th to 12th grade. This is where the PIAA allows us then to use the kids that are 21 that are here, that are in our extended school program to 21. They can also participate, which is awesome. So a lot of the rules are PIAA, but then some of them aren't. And we had a really good meeting with the Special Olympics guy. It was Dr. Cuthbert, Mr. Milnes, and myself. Mr. Milnes, being the supervisor of special ed, can understand all the things that we need to do to get the roster together. They would follow the same PIAA paperwork. They would do all the sections to get a physical, everything like that. There are 3 running events, 3 field events, and 2 relays. Every student will do 1 running event and 1 field event, and they will train for that event all year. And then the coach will decide if they run a relay or if and when they run a relay. The events are 100, 400, and 800 for the running events. The field events are shot put, running long jump, and mini javelin. It's a little javelin with a ball in the end, in the front of it. So it's kind of cool. The length of the season, again, starts with the PIAA, runs through May 18th. There's a regional meet. If the kids do well at the regional meet, they can go to states at Shippensburg and run with part of the PIAA championships, which is at Shippensburg on Memorial Day weekend. There'll be 2 practices a week. And as Randy said, since there's 400 kids down on the track, I thought maybe you guys could build a new track somewhere. No, I'm just kidding. But we will come up with the days of the week that make sense. Maybe when the high school's away, the middle school's away. I'll work with Randy on that part of it. But again, there'll be 4 meets. We'll host one of the 4. There'll be tri or quad meets, 3 or 4 teams. And so, yeah, it'll be great. And then like I said, we'll host one. So the cost, everyone will want to know what the cost is. The Special Olympic gives us some money to start up for the first 2 years. They give us $1,500 for a coach. I would think that we could match the $1,500 and pay 2 coaches and do $1,500 for each coach. Obviously, if we need a paraprofessional for students in that Special Olympics, that would be a cost. And then obviously transportation, game workers, anything like that. But they give us money for all the equipment, like the mini javelins and shot puts. They're going to give us the money for uniforms. They give us all that money. So really the cost of this would be really inexpensive. And as you know, we have a club at the school called Best Buddies. So after your first 2 years doing this, they want you to fundraise at least $1,800. And they told us to start a club, but we're already there. So we're way ahead of the game. So Best Buddies would be a great avenue to be able to fundraise money and support this great program. So that was basically it. It was a great meeting with the person from the Special Olympics, and I believe I sent over the MOU, which kind of outlines a lot of this stuff. So yeah, if there's any questions for me, I'd love to answer them.
I'm very excited about this. I think this is great. I think one of the big things that you left out that I'm most excited about, this is an inclusive.
Yes.
It's not just for special education students or special needs students. It is for any student who wants to join. Now, I am under the impression that students without a disability cannot go to states and such through this program. They have to go through our typical track and
Yeah,
field,
and
correct?
they can't do both. They can't run on they can't run on both track teams. They would have to be on one roster or the other.
So
That's
we
correct.
have to have our typically developing students choose
Yes.
if they want to participate
Yeah.
with peers or with, okay.
Yes.
Got it.
Yep. And that's why I have Mr. Milnes, because there's different rules about how the roster's set up and what certain students with disabilities are. So that's why I have Mr. Milnes. I'm working with him to make sure that we have the roster set up correctly.
Okay, questions for Eric or for Randy on the athletic side?
I'd just like to put a plug in for the Unified Track. I've seen it before. It's a really great program. And it does get some other kids to participate too, because obviously we have, the inclusion factor, but also the students, the regular ed students that are on that can't be on a PIAA spring sport. So you're going to have another opportunity or avenue for kids. And it's really neat. If you've ever seen one of those meets, it's a great program, and it's something that I definitely think we should have. Okay.
I'll re-ask my cost question.
Now we
Is
got
this
to go back.
startup
Can we
or
go back
annual?
to the cost slide? So my answer for you is it'll vary by team.
Okay.
Golf. That was the first one.
The one that has all the costs. Frank,
that-
second to last one.
We'll do, this is good. We can go through team by team. This is fine? Because there's a cost on there, right? That's what's on there. Okay.
Bob, yep.
So golf is fairly consistent in that we buy the golf shirts every year. So the cost you see for golf is going to be pretty much standard each year. Okay. Then when we flip through the other ones, wrestling, that cost there. The uniforms generally for all our sports, you look at on average 5 years. So there'll be a uniform cost 1 year, and then until we get to 5 years, we'll replace it. So the singlets generally are not too expensive. I'm going to say like most of them are like in the $40 to $50 range. We buy 40 or 50 for all the wrestlers. So that cost would be every 5 years. So that would, if you're looking at annually, it's not always going to be that much for wrestling. Okay. The next one, lacrosse. So this include, and when you look at these costs, like there's transportation, there's officials, there's equipment, there's uniforms. Those are yearly things except for the uniforms.
And the coaches,
And the coaches.
which is
yeah.
the biggest cost.
Yeah. So when you look at middle school boys lacrosse, probably, conservative estimate would be around 3,500, maybe 4,000 for a uniform. So, every fifth year you would have that number, and then the other years it would, dip by about $4,000.
And then you did request a matching 1,500, you said, for the unified track?
Yeah, so I felt like, $1,500 for one coach, but we should have two coaches, and I felt like I didn't want to split that 1,500 into two. I felt like 1,500 for each coach was a fair.
Just a quick second question. I know the middle school girls volleyball had a lot of support at a past meeting. Just curious as why it was pushed down to 24, 25, just specifically around the work that needs to be done, or?
Excellent question. I think we have more slides. Okay, so you heard enough about those. So middle school volleyball, and our coach Ken Hunt, he's coached the boys at Daniel Boone, and he came over to coach our girls. I'm happy to say that he's not going to coach at Boone anymore, and he's dedicating himself solely to the girls volleyball program. And when you look at this, it's the site work. Like, we have our capital budget for next year already set. So what this involves, it's not just drilling a hole in the floor and dropping a pole in it. Like, you have to go under the floor, and I'm not the expert, but facilities tells me you need, like, I think around 6 feet of concrete around the pole under the floor. And we would be looking at 6 holes, because they'd like to have 2 sideways courts for practice so more kids can play. And then the main court would be aligned with the basketball court. So there would be 6 of those going in. So you have to pull some of the floor up, and so we're in the process of getting quotes for that. And there is interest. Coach Hunt did a great job. He ran voluntary workouts down there. They had great turnout and a lot of kids. And again, I think it was before I got here, but I think 2015 maybe was when they started volleyball. Eric, you were here. Does that sound about right? Yeah. So they've been kind of operating just as a high school program, and there's no feeder program. Boys Lacrosse has a very strong feeder program. There's not a feeder program for volleyball. Now, they can do some club and some other things, but we feel like this would be a big, in the future, asset to that program to help them grow. But it's all about the site work that would need to be done. He also wants more holes on the middle school or the high school court. However, the high school's hardwood and it's floating, so there's a gap underneath the wood to what's underneath it. And that's more involved and more expensive. So if there's any chance we're gonna get a new gym, we don't wanna put the money into doing that at the high school.
And that may answer my question, is this is not a situation where our middle school team can share space with the high school.
Correct. And it will, girls volleyball is in the fall, and the advantage in the fall is it's nicer than the spring. Boys volleyball, which hasn't really made it to the pack yet. I think Springford's the only school that has that team. That's in the spring, so that you're going to see more issues with adding in the spring, because we're not inside as much on the inclement weather schedule, and we can work something out. We have a divider. If we have the sideways courts, we could put volleyball on one side, put another team on the other, and still give everyone some time when it's bad weather. But in the spring, it's rough because well, we don't play night games until after the first week in April, just because I've seen too many games where it's like 40 degrees and the kids are freezing. And usually when we start, it almost always snows either the week before we start or the week we start. So we're spending a lot of times in the gym in the spring. And at the high school, the only place where we have a batting cage is in the main gym, which complicates things even farther. So those are things to consider in the future, if there's talk about boys volleyball, but again, another gym might solve some of those problems. So.
Well, so this gives us a lot of insight into growing sports. Are there any sport trends that we should be aware of where enrollment is declining, that we have fewer students than we had maybe 5 or 10 years ago?
Not necessarily at OJR. I mean, I know some of the freshman teams have not run because of the number of, we didn't have enough kids. So we have 6. In the fall, we have field hockey and football. They generally run. Field hockey's been hit or miss the last couple of years, and they've had to double roster some kids between JV, and instead of a freshman team, they use it as JVB, so they didn't have to cut as many kids. In the winter, boys basketball runs, girls basketball. Last year has not had the numbers for that. And in the spring, we have boys baseball with 9th grade and girls lacrosse. Baseball's been running, girls lacrosse has been not been running the last couple of years. So I think 9th grade, you see a lot of things going on with teams. Like we always have a schedule, and then you find out who doesn't have enough for a team, and then we scramble and we try to fill all those openings. I feel like not at OJR, but softball in the middle school level, a lot of teams, like we have a 7th grade softball schedule, and we lose half the games on there because some schools don't have enough players. And then we have to go out and find other teams to play some teams multiple times. So there are some sports at those levels where you see numbers, maybe not where they should be, but I feel like for the most part, our sports, other than some 9th grade teams, are not experiencing that. We have full teams, we have 7th and 8th grade teams, we have a lot of kids playing a lot of sports.
On those 9th grade teams, are we losing the athletes after middle school, or are they just being promoted to JV and varsity quicker?
They end up moving up, because I know like the girls lacrosse team only cut a couple of kids this year, but they still didn't run because those kids some of them are playing varsity, some of them are playing JV, so they've kind of been absorbed into that varsity JV level.
Do we have any other teams that have requested to create that are not on here?
I've had some questions about boys volleyball, so that's one. But again, it's the same thing. When the site work's done, that might be something that's more feasible in the future. And when we figure out the high school gym situation with the batting net and space and things like that. Not necessarily here. I haven't heard. Some PAC schools have heard flag football for girls. NFL's running something where they're trying to, they're supporting that. They're providing some funds for that. The Philadelphia Catholic League started that last year. It hasn't made it to the PAC yet, but that's something on the horizon that we could potentially hear about, just because I know they had a lot of success with it in the Catholic League.
I've heard rumblings about soccer. So is that something
Soccer?
for a freshman soccer team? Because we've had to cut quite a few.
Yeah, so we've
students.
had talks about that. The only question is who are they going to play? Because there's not a lot of, freshman teams are kind of hit or miss, and there's not a lot of schools that have a separate freshman team, so we will be looking at a lot of really long bus trips most likely, and I talked to Coach Youngblood about that because we brought it up, and I said, well, who you're going to play might be an issue. Now, if you could do like field hockey and run it as JVB, which means you can have 9th graders on there, but you can also have upperclassmen on there if they don't make varsity. So that's another option, but still, you're going to have a hard time probably finding games because we lose sometimes a few JV games a year and we go out and get other ones, but so you're going to be trying to play JV teams, that might have a full schedule, and there's limits on how many games you can play. So that's the one concern I would have with the 9th grade, adding a 9th grade team at this point.
Do we have any, a little bit off topic, I guess, but do we have any sports where there's like a large number of people trying out, and a lot of kids are getting cut. And then if there are sports like that, are there like some other place where they could land to like be active, like,
Yeah, I
track
think-
and field or
Well,
something?
a lot
yeah.
of people land in track and field, yeah. I think soccer, I think, is the big one. Especially at the middle school level, like we have armies of kids coming out and they're all playing club and travel, and it's hard to cut. Like you could have 90 kids coming out for the middle school soccer team. So I would say that would be the biggest one. And I think that there's always club and travel, which is big in soccer. A lot of kids, while they're playing middle school, will concurrently play on their club and travel teams, and they'll play all year round. And so that's, obviously somewhere where they could go. It's not, you don't like having to cut that many kids. And at the high school, the boys do have a lot of people trying out also. So that's why Coach Youngblood has inquired about a freshman team. But that would be my concern is who are we playing and how many games are we getting them? Because JVB field hockey, when it runs, is a challenge because it's not a freshman team, so we can't play a freshman team, because PIAA won't allow that, because you can technically have middle school kids on a 9th grade team. You can bring 8th graders up to play on that, so they can't play against another JV team, so you can't mix there. So it kind of limits it. And with field hockey, when it runs, we generally find a couple teams and we play them at least twice, a home and away, and it's a significant amount of travel. So, those are factors when you're considering stuff like that.
Thanks.
Sure. Was that our last slide, Frank? Or?
Good, no other questions? Okay. So I know that we have a pretty big audience here tonight, and I suspect I know why. So I'm going to open up to any questions or comments from the floor.
John.
East Coventry. Coach DeFeo's here with a lot of the high school kids, and there's some Coventry kids here that are in 5th and 6th grade coming up. I just want to say that from an equipment perspective, there's been a lot of activity as the ground swells, and we hear more about this becoming a possibility. From an equipment perspective, I can truly say in the past week we've had a lot of donors asking how can we get involved. So we'll help defray costs. Our biggest concern tonight is all these kids are going to go on vacation into the mountains and the shore, and you're going to make a decision in a few weeks and they'll all be gone. So that's why we came tonight. But we just want you to know that we're here to support the effort however we can. Thank you.
Hello. So I'm Coach DeFeo. Also, my other title, they like to call me the Director of Positivity on the team. I know. I actually have an interesting way of coming to ONJ. I born and bred through Perkiomen Valley. Went to PV, graduated, returned to PV, worked there for 7 years, coached at the high school team for all of those 7 years as well. And then when Kevin Moe became the head coach here, he was one of my alumni, called me and asked if I would help him, and I was ecstatic to be able to come and help one of my alumni. But I can tell you on my first day coming in and stepping into this building was very nerve-wracking, as I was the enemy for so long. And having to come in and learning, especially with the Kaye family, that's a name that has been said over the loudspeakers against PV way too many times, I was like, what am I getting myself into? But I will tell you, I was blown away by the support and the love from this team. They have bought into everything that we have done for them and been trying to do for them. They've been through a lot. 4 different head coaches in the past 4 years, 4 different cultures. They've been through the pandemic, and they've been through something that I've seen myself as being a member of the local community, dwindling numbers through the lacrosse. At the youth program, it's becoming more difficult because less club teams are existing as middle school teams are getting made. For them to be able to play at that middle school club level, they're having to travel hours to find teams. To get refs, it's difficult because refs for the PIAA are going to ref for actual middle school programs as opposed to reffing for club programs. It's a disaster everywhere. So if there was ever a better time to start getting that middle school growing again, it would be adding that sport to the actual school district, so the exposure is there. One thing I think, a major resource that is huge right now, is that you have parents like Mr. Kaye and Mrs. Della Penna and Mr. Toulouse, who's here, and he's in charge of the club now, that are willing and ready to help set this up. But their time at O&J is limited. As their kids get older and they leave the district, you're going to have a new group of parents who really don't understand the heritage or haven't seen what this program was in its heyday. Which, when I played against O&J, it was very common for the teams. You had a JV-A, a JV-B. I remember my first year coaching for PV against O&J. We lost 15-0 against your JV team, which was almost all juniors and sophomores. I mean, there were numbers and skill. And it's not just you. A lot of people are struggling, but I think you're in a great position with these parents here that are willing to help with funding, help with gear, and help train the coaches and the upcoming parents. It's a valuable resource we can't give up. On top of that, we have plenty of players here who have siblings that are in the youth club now and are coming up to play in high school, but even those numbers are starting to get small. If we add this as a middle school team, you still have siblings who understand what OJR lacrosse is that can bring their friends in. I know that we were worried about, are we going to be pulling from other teams, or are we going to be getting new? I believe we're going to be getting more students that are going to be playing this sport, because like you said, we don't know who's playing club, who's playing outside, or who just was like, I didn't even know we had lacrosse. But in having these younger middle schoolers here that are already in it, being able to bring their friends, again, just another invaluable resource. So for me, that's really it today. I just kind of really wanted to encourage why it's important now to start this middle school team, as opposed to waiting when all of the things that are really helping us are going to be gone. So thank you for listening.
Greg Engelhardt, East Coventry. So I was going to talk about wrestling, but first of all, the track and field for the children with special needs is super important. Not only will it give an opportunity for those kids to compete, it will give opportunities for students to help those children and to be exposed to environments they're not. And Mr. Romanos, you're talking about ways to help children integrate, how to help them so they're not at home with detention. What a great way, possibly, to help them understand the other things that are going out there, to drive a purpose in someone's life who might not have it, and move them out of that arena of despair that they might be in, or that troubled cycle that they're in. Might give them an opportunity to grow and become a better person in society, versus someone who's relying on selling drugs or whatever to move forward. In regards to lacrosse, I had 2 boys that played lacrosse, and as Coach just said, they went through that 4 years of every other year a new coach. Not having a middle school team really was kind of the start of the fall down, because we did see the diminishing in the club sports, and they're even having to do Coventry, or then try to go to the really competitive ones, and if they weren't year-round lacrosse players, really limited their opportunities. So having a middle school boys team might really drive up some of the participation with that, and really help with the program and bring more kids in. And of course, last with girls wrestling, there was a question, how much interest is there? Right now we have 7 girls that from freshman all the way to senior, including 2 that were juniors this year, that want to wrestle next year on a girls team. And why that's not a full team, obviously that brings an opportunity for them to compete. It's not like if they don't have a full team, they can't play. It's just a bye at that weight class, or if they go to a tournament, they don't enter someone in that level. So it's not really impacting what the team does or how they do, but it will drive other people to that. In that are 2 seniors, and I will not mention their name for next year, but they've never wrestled before. They've always wanted to. Their brothers wrestled, friends wrestled, and they want to do it, but they didn't want to wrestle against the boys for a lot of reasons. And last, obviously, I do think it will drive participation and give girls in winter, particularly where there's a decrease in winter sports, particularly for girls, an opportunity to participate in something that's meaningful and impactful, focused on health, focused on physical condition, mental toughness, all the things that wrestling brings. So hopefully that is something that you see as valuable as well, that I've seen positive in my boys, but also in my daughter that looks to do that. And even young Ava, who's here as well, who's there. In that regard, you also asked what's the interest like at the youth level? We had 5 girls that will be in high school that were on the middle school team last year. There are 4 girls that will be on the middle school team this year that either wrestled on the middle school team last year or were very active at the 6th grade level last year, so 7th and 8th grade, at least 4, it might be 5. And obviously that'll be on the boys mixed team. But we do know that there's over 30 girls in the Norchester Youth Wrestling program. And it really started with a hand group, girls like my daughter, Jenny Gotro, Ava Brandt, a couple girls like that. And it's in the last 5 years, it's exploded. And they're just girls, they get to do girls only events, girl only tournaments. The state level, it's expanded. And so the participation in that sport is really growing. And I do think if we add a team this year, we'll probably see 8 to 10 girls. I would say next year that we'd probably fill out a full roster of 13 plus and really give them an opportunity to expand and have another opportunity to compete here at Owen J. Roberts. So thank you. If there's any other questions. No, thanks.
Drew Brandt from East Nantmeal. I'll talk a little bit about girls wrestling first, and then I can talk about lacrosse. The wrestling, it's very important because what's going to end up happening is the girls, we got 30 girls in the youth program, they love wrestling, and they're okay with wrestling boys up until they hit middle school. When they start to hit middle school, then they don't have an avenue as much anymore. So they'll start losing when they get to the boys. And you got my daughter who's wrestled since she was 5 years old. She was at States last year. She will inevitably quit wrestling in middle school if there's not a girls program. She's already told me she doesn't have an interest in wrestling boys. So that's the requirements that we kind of have. From a lacrosse standpoint, I agree 100%. What ends up happening too, if you don't have a middle school program where these kids can play with each other year round, they will go to clubs, expensive clubs, the ones that can afford it, and they'll just play club. They won't play at the high school level. Because most of the college recruiting happens at the club level. So that is something that you have to really worry about. Any questions?
Hi, I'm Jen Delapenna, South Coventry Township. I'm also president of Coventry Youth Lacrosse. I just wanted to, first, the unified track and field. That is great. I'm so glad Eric brought that up tonight, that I think that would be something for the high school, for all the students to be able to participate in. As far as lacrosse goes, I just want to give some statistics. Our middle school girls lacrosse program, both our 7th and 8th grade girls lacrosse went undefeated this season. 8th grade girls went 13-0, and the 7th grade girls went 12-0. The program itself, there were some cuts that were made for both programs. We were able to bring some girls in as managers. Those girls have all played Coventry Youth Lacrosse all the way through, and now a lot do play travel and club lacrosse. The girls that are on the 2023 team, Eric's daughter, those girls, they are all homegrown from Owen J. Roberts. They all started here together from Coventry, from K2 all the way up. And they are great student athletes, great examples for all of the girls as models, like our younger daughters. But these girls stayed together, and they're staying in ONJ. What's happening with the boys, and this is what Drew was referring to, so we have our boys and they're in youth clubs with Coventry, but what happens when they get to middle school, they're going to Malvern, they're going to the Hill, they're leaving because we don't have that strong enough program. Unlike our girls program, these girls can't wait to rise up and play in high school in ONJ. So we need to have that strong community, and these little brothers coming up through Coventry know they have a place in a middle school program, and they will then thrive moving into high school with consistent coaching. So I just wanted to bring that up tonight, and hopefully we're moving forward for next year for boys middle school lacrosse. Thank you.
We have one hand raised. Lisa Smith, please state your full name and township of residence.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, thank you. Lisa Smith, East Coventry. I just wanted to revisit the 9th grade soccer topic. I think the points made about a lot of these kids playing club is true for all of these sports that we're talking about. And I think all of these teams do bring a lot of value. I just wanted to revisit the fact that, I know it was mentioned you had about 90 boys go out for 40 positions in middle school. I think for the incoming freshmen, it will probably equate to about at least 30 incoming freshmen competing for, I'm going to guess, maybe 8 to 10 spots. So I just didn't want to downplay the number of kids that, do have their hearts set on playing in high school. Even though, yes, they are part of club teams, they do have their hearts set on representing their high school, being a part of that program. And so I just wanted to put that out there if there's any opportunity for reconsideration.
Thank you all very much.
I have a
Go ahead, David.
comment. I didn't hear from any athletes. I didn't know if there were any athletes that really thought they had something to say. That would help convince me.
Rick Whitlock, South Country Township. I just want to jump on what Jen said about what's happening with sports, and especially in lacrosse. My son, who's a senior, his 8th grade year, that team that he played on, 7 kids are not at O&J as seniors. They're either at Malvern Prep, Episcopal, or the Hill School, because there wasn't a strong enough program here. But then it also drives into other sports of kids leaving, because when you get recruited to go to the Hill School or Malvern Prep or Episcopal or even Shanahan, it's what the other sports offer as well. The kids are going to play for multiple sports, not just for lacrosse. So we're getting robbed continuously because of the strength of our boys program. Girls program is strong. They're going to win states. That's why they're staying. Boys, they're leaving. If you got any talent, you're getting scooped up. Thank you.
Yeah, so thanks for the presentations and thanks for being here to support your respective programs. At our next meeting, it will be our administrative recommendation to add these programs that we talked about tonight. So our board will take action at the next meeting in June.
Thank you. Okay, we are moving on to number 4, logo redesign update. Sorry, Mr. Rogers.
Have a wonderful 17-hour presentation for everyone today. I'm going to draw it by hand, and we're all going to learn how to draw it up on the whiteboard. Wanted to just give the school board an update on some of the work we've been doing over the last few months. Since the last time I was before you, we had our meeting with the OJR logo committee. And for those who might not be familiar with what we're doing, I just wanted to kind of give a brief overview of where we are, what we're doing, and kind of show you, what we have to potentially move forward with. For those who are unfamiliar with OJR's logo, in a nutshell, just kind of over time, we've had different variations of logos, some that are not in compliance, some that we are unsure of their origins, and we have some concerns with consistency in terms of which logos are being used, how they're being utilized, et cetera. So really the overarching reason that we are looking to revise the logos fell into 3 categories: consistency, making sure that we're all using the same logos all the time; compliance, making sure that we are not going to be on the receiving end of a cease and desist letter; and then accessibility as well, which is really ensuring that staff has, and teams and organizations that support OJR have access to the logos for their purposes, and making sure that anyone can access that. It's not limited to one person, or if that person is unavailable, everything grinds to a halt. And so our logo committee met just a little over a month ago. We reviewed different elements and colors, wanted to see where we're at, kind of get a consensus. We had the opportunity to see how other districts, even in Chester County, have approached taking a look at their logos, and it was very important for us to have that community feedback, to have feedback from students, to have feedback from parents, support organizations, community members, staff as well. And so, they made their recommendations, and we kind of ran a timeline by them and took some of their feedback that we incorporated into some of the logos that we have here tonight. Some of the takeaways that we had from talking to them was that our community really likes having options. While they want consistency, they do want to have the ability to personalize, equipment. They take pride in what their groups are doing here in OJR. And so they wanted different logos that would provide flexibility, not just at, say, the elementary and secondary level, but also, variations on if they decide to go with a gray shirt, or if they go with a white shirt or a black shirt. They wanted to be able to potentially combine things like the Wildcat head, maybe with approved OJR fonts, things of that nature, just to give them some options to take a look at. So the first one that we have, this is the revised Wildcat head logo. There will be a slight change on this. We're waiting for one last tweak from the IU. The big logo that you see up top is going to have a black outline around it, very, very small, very thin, just to make sure that it shows up, especially on gray backgrounds or maybe more neutral backgrounds as well. As you can tell, it's not all that dissimilar from what has been in use for the past 13 or so years. I always joke with anyone who asks that if you were to see some of the logos side by side, it's almost like a matching game you would play on your phone. It's just enough to make sure that we have all of our bases covered, but not enough that it's a complete radical redesign. And then below there, you can kind of see what we have with, some of where we made like monochrome, where it's gray. You might have someone who wants to do grayscale. What does that look like? All of those incorporate our official color, so it's not, we're not looking at an orange OJR Wildcat head, things of that nature. So it's the three colors that we look at, which are red as the primary, and then gray, white, and black as accent colors. It doesn't show up on here. We actually do have a white one as well. So if there's a black background, there is a white Wildcat head logo as well. And we kind of view that more for the secondary level. Really just what we got from them is sports teams want to do that. A lot of the middle school and high school kids like that. And so, we're going to keep that available to them. After that, we have the Paul logo. Again, not terribly different, but we're going to be consistent with the red that we use. You can kind of see we have a white outline as well, black as well. This was a little more popular with our elementary schools. The feedback that we received from them was that they wanted to have the Paul logo, that maybe the Wildcat didn't quite fit what they were going for at the elementary level. So we're going to keep that as well. That's day-to-day use, fun activities, apparel, on coffee cups, et cetera, et cetera. And then we have, this is a newer one, this is a banner logo. It revises something similar to what we had earlier, but again, in our accent colors. These are things where maybe we want letterhead on top of something for social media, building, branding, sponsorships. This was actually quite popular with some of the departments and support organizations who wanted to take some of the OJR and maybe underneath have band or theater or choir or whatever those things are. So that can be utilized for that, and we'll show you kind of just how that looks real quick. But yeah, multiple colors on those like this so that we can match to different backgrounds and t-shirts. These are examples of some of the combinations. They're not limited to this, but here's some of what they can do. For example, with that OJR banner logo, you could take school district off, you could take O&J Roberts off, you could just have OJR with the Wildcat, you could have the Paul with Wildcats, you could have the Wildcat head with fonts that are approved as well. So really just trying to give people a lot of the options there. And then we still have the seal for official documents. This wasn't as popular for apparel or sports murals. This would be, if the business department is presenting something, it's probably not appropriate to have a Wildcat head on a finance report, but we'll have the seal on this, diplomas, things of that nature. So that's not going anywhere, but we did match the colors to make sure that across all of the different options that it's the same type of red. And then last but not least, we did talk about uniforms and how that would look for our team. So red is the primary color. And for our official jerseys, uniforms, we're looking at activities, games, warm-ups for that. For non-official apparel, we're not going to hold to the red. As we've said, we don't necessarily want to be, the logo police, as it were. So we understand that students might like a black jacket with a logo on it. That's fine. If they're on the court or if they're on the field, it has to be an official uniform that has our official colors. But there are some options there for things that they might wear around campus. One of the things that we did have that was very important when we talked to the committee was that we weren't mixing and matching old and new logos. So as you have layers, the layer must be complete. So you might have jackets where, as they're ordering new jackets, it's the updated logo. The uniform, maybe we haven't kind of gone through that life cycle yet, so that, that might be a year or two down the road from that. But one of the nice things we have with that, there's not a whole lot of variation, so we're not going to have an identity crisis associated with that. And then our timeline, we are hoping, based on feedback that we receive from the school board, if there's anything in particular that this group is looking for, we can finalize the logos, get them out to schools this month as they start ordering for the new school year. The schools, we've had different conversations and departments talking about, hold off on ordering new merchandise with the old logos. We'll have something coming your way. Also understanding that some of them have inventory. They don't have to throw it out. It's still around. They can use it up. And then as they replenish, please switch over to the new logos. And one of the nice things about the system that we have in place now is that we can easily make those logos available to our approved vendors. So they can get to work on that right away. Facilities and buildings will be, obviously transitioned as refreshes are needed. And then again, with the teams, as we mentioned, as the need arises, as the life cycle of their equipment phases out. We anticipate that a lot of the apparel, we're probably looking about a year, because they tend to do that on a year-to-year basis. Some of the uniforms will be a little bit beyond that, but again, if someone didn't necessarily know and have logos sitting side by side, we're not going with a drastic change. And that's our update for you. Happy to take any questions or feedback.
A couple questions. Are you going to publish an official style guide so that people can follow, some basic guidelines with good and bad examples in it?
Absolutely. So we are going to have guidelines for usage for third-party vendors, and then we are also working with the IU to have a comprehensive style guide that outlines uses, recommendations, do's and don'ts, things of that nature.
Exactly. And then the only thing you said, people might put like, whatever, OJR band or whatever, theater or whatever, cross country. So I would suggest you have a guideline for that third line. Like, I don't want to see any Comic Sans, track and field, papyrus theater fonts.
Well, and to that point, I am happy we are finalizing what the official OJR font will be. That will also be in the style guide, so that'll make it much easier too when anyone's ordering anything. They will have the exact colors that they can provide to a vendor, and they will have fonts and guidelines as well for them.
Great, thanks.
Michael, what's the oversight process for this to ensure that all these logos are being utilized properly? I know we've got so many different organizations between grade school, the middle school, all the different teams and whatnot, PTAs. I want to, how do we make sure that all the correct logos are being utilized? I think if you do an easy, a Google search could turn up, 20 different logos, and somebody thinks, I'll just use that one. So, I just want to make sure, that there's a process in place to ensure that the correct logos are being used.
Absolutely. And so one of the things as we're rolling this out, there will be trainings, and I use the word training, but, just letting people know where their resources are available, what's available, making sure that the right people who are in charge of those organizations know who to get in contact if we need to provide access to someone, making sure they're aware of the guidelines. That'll be meeting with the schools, especially as we gear up for the new school year and throughout the summer. And those organizations, in fact, we've already been in contact with many organizations, so they know this is coming, so they're prepared for what's coming, and it's been a very positive response. And then, with those guidelines and stuff, it does give us kind of a benchmark so that we can turn around if someone is not following the guidelines to say, hey, this is why we have this in place. And in some cases, because we're going to have that repository of logos, someone who's not in compliance might not be able to access that until they bring their stuff up to compliance.
Well, and I can also just comment, having gone through a rebranding at work, that the style guide can be very challenging for a graphics design type person. But if you're offering to say, yeah, we'll produce the logo if you describe what you want to us, you know, like if all you want is this OJR with, you know, band or lacrosse below it, like we'll just deliver that for you. That was super helpful in my company's rebranding. Like I had a presentation that I couldn't figure out how to rebrand, sent it to an email address, they sent it back rebranded, and to me that was like just magic and made the experience way better. So I'm hoping that the administration will be able to offer that to people.
Yeah, and one of the reasons for the access as well is whether it's the communications office assisting someone, whether they're working with a third-party vendor or there's someone on the campus. The nice thing is that A, we can provide that service, B, we can make it easy for people to access and know exactly what those styles are, and then C, making it so that you know, we can have that consistency across, and we're more than happy to work with any organization or department.
A lot of times, like basketball buy shooting shirts. Their teams buy like shirts they might wear in warm-ups that aren't part of the uniform. Do they fall?
Generally speaking, so the question was whether or not like certain like warm-up things.
Yeah,
and-
like it's not like basketball buys different shooting shirts.
And that's something that we can certainly discuss to see kind of what the thought is. The idea is that we do want to keep it to as close to the OJR colors as we can, but we do have some options there, you know, to see what specifically we're talking about.
Any additional questions or comments from the board for anything online, Frank?
I think they look great.
I think they look great.
I'm not sure we said that.
No, and you know, as someone who frequently orders clothing and materials for clubs and organizations in the district, being able to take this to my vendor and give them, you know, I may not necessarily know how to use a style guide well, but I know the vendor does, and that will certainly make things a lot easier for those of us who, as volunteers, are ordering things for organizations within the district.
And high res and available 24/7 to those vendors.
Right, for sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Frank, we're good? Okay. Any comments from the floor on? Okay. That's it. I am going to adjourn the meeting. We meet next on June 5, correct? Oh, that is today. We're going into June 9th, June 26th for public, yes. Thank you.